Ми продовжуємо вести наш марафон, і зараз буде панель, яка мені видається особисто дуже важливою, тому що для того, щоб забезпечувати права жінок, для того, щоб рухатися вперед, нам обов'язково треба аналізувати той досвід, який отримали інші жінки під час збройних конфліктів. На жаль, війни в світі продовжуються, і багато чого ми можемо проаналізувати, виходячи з тих процесів, які вже відбулися. Тому зараз у нас буде панель, яка називається «Досвід Балкан». Те, що у нас є спільного і відмінного, вона буде англійською мовою, тому ті, хто дивляться нас в онлайні, будь ласка, переключайтеся на переклад. And I want to welcome the speakers, and I want to present the ladies that work on the topic. And I'm very thankful for your contribution. Today online with us are Vineta, Kleine, NATO missions director in Ukraine, I'm sorry, and Maja Bosnic, who is the gender expert, the TED speaker, and the specialist on finance and gender budgeting from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you, ladies, for joining the marathon. And I want to start with a question about we today really talk too much about the long-term consequences of the wars. And I think that the experience of Balkans is really the thing to speak about. So I want to start with the question, what were the long-term consequences for women after the war happened? Because we really have like more than 20 years past, and the lessons and conclusions have been done. So how it shaped, how these wars shaped the gender equality, what happened, and let's discuss this and let it be the first question. Vineta, if you can start, please do that.
Thank you, Vineta, so much. First of all, thank you, Kseniya, for this introduction, and thank you all the colleagues. I don't see you there in Kiev, but I already feel that I'm with you, and I actually wish I'm physically with you, and Elena and Maria Tishenko, we were discussing, and I was really eager to come, and unfortunately couldn't come, but thank you for organizing this event. I am aware that we don't have much time, so I will maybe first start just by saying that since you invited me to this panel, I have been rereading about the consequences of the war in Bosnia, but I don't need to read too much because I was just now reflecting on the movie that we all saw that is very, very, yes, very personal for me too, because I think the first thing that I would like to highlight is that the war experience is deeply personal. And we are now talking about the community and societal response that is absolutely important and crucial. And I think another crucial and important dimension is this personal trauma that stays with us. So I wanted to reflect, maybe just to say that when the war in Bosnia started, and that is the war on Balkan countries, and Vineta will also talk about that, that is the war that started in 92 to 95. So when we are reflecting to 20 years, it's actually 30 years ago. And I myself am shocked because you feel the consequences of the war 30 years so fresh that when I was watching this movie, I really needed to try to collect myself very well, even though 30 years has passed. And I was thinking that maybe now in Kiev, there is or somewhere in other cities in Ukraine, there is a 13-year-old girl, I was 13-year-old then, who will maybe in 30 years talk about her experience and her lived experience and her professional experience. And that made me feel just deeply sad, because these are not the realities that we want our girls and boys to experience. But having said that, just to say maybe a few points, and then I will put on Vineta. The first thing that I think is really important to acknowledge that the war on Balkan is the war that lasted full 4 years. So these are the years that families separated, that people left the country, that women, it's very much of what we are now seeing in Ukraine. Unfortunately, I myself did not see my father for 4 years during the Bosnian War. 100,000 people were killed and over 2.2 million people were displaced. So that was at the time the most devastating conflict in Europe since the end of the World War II. Now, it's also important that 10,000 women were killed and between 15 and 50,000 of women were raped during the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina only. And it's a small country, I just need to say. Also, what is really prominent is that gender issues have started to be discussed only, not in the Dayton Peace Accord. That is the peace accord that brought peace to that side of the world and Bosnia and Herzegovina, but no women participated in any peace negotiations during this whole period, not only in Bosnia, but then later also when it comes to Serbia and Kosovo status. And these are quite shocking data. So gender issues have only started to be discussed in 99 and especially up to 2000 when we got our 1325 UN resolution. So I think these are just some of the issues that I wanted to open with to just highlight the fact that there was a very prominent absence of gender discussion when it comes to the political and prominent political structures in Bosnia during the war. So we didn't have women among the negotiators, mediators, signatories of the peace accord. We also didn't have women mentioned in war memorials or monuments of history books in a sense. So these are the things that I wanted to highlight. And again, the last point before I turn to Vineta, I know again we have a lot to talk about and not much time, but I wanted to just highlight this issue of rape and sexual violence in the war, because it was on the Balkan example that we have come and fine-tuned a lot of international, the way the international community works with these issues, because just to recognize survivors of rape and to give them a status, we always have war veterans and they had the status immediately, but to recognize the sexual violence, that took really long time. I will stop here. I will have other points a little bit later.
Vineta,
Maja,
can you
many
add, please?
thanks. So, yeah, can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. I can fully echo what Maja just said, and to be more focused and to focus my to what I want to say, I will speak about sexual violence, especially about sexual violence and sexual crimes which were committed in Kosovo. Because from 2011 till the end of 2015, I worked in Kosovo and I was advising Minister for Kosovo Security Force. And I was meeting also many women, and these are things, so or stories I personally heard and I'm familiar with. Regretfully, sexual violence has been used in armed conflicts throughout history. And this widespread crime has grave and long-term effects on individuals, on their families, and on entire communities. And thousands of women were victims of sexual crimes during the Balkan conflicts in the 90s. However, as Maja already mentioned, most of them receive no support from state or municipality or local community, and no support despite the progress marked by international criminal law in prosecuting these crimes. During the armed conflict in Kosovo, which took place in 1998 and 1999, around 20,000 rapes of Kosovar women were carried out by Serbian soldiers and police. However, only a few of those women have spoken openly about what they underwent. Instead, most of Kosovo women have been coping with their pain and shame in silence, alone, and their traumas have not been processed openly. And here comes a question, why silently? because rape survivors in Kosovo felt afraid to speak openly. They felt afraid to tell anyone about what happened to them. They were afraid of the social stigma attached to sexual crimes and the fear of ostracization by their families and communities. And many survivors were forced to keep silent by patriarchs or older women who acted as custodians of tradition. However, by keeping the traumatic experience to themselves, the trauma they suffered was prolonged. And long after rape, women still felt ashamed, and many of them admitted that they felt dirty and ashamed. And it is important to understand that a rape is a transgenerational trauma, and the effects of this trauma are resonating across generations. And after rape, the victims, the family of the victim, and society struggle with the long-term consequences of these acts. And one more thing I would like to underline is that also rape and sexual assault committed during a conflict are legally considered atrocity crimes. They are rarely prosecuted by international national courts. And I will give you just an example that so far only 6 men have been found guilty of crimes committed during the armed conflict in Kosovo by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. And local courts in Kosovo are just in the beginning of prosecuting war crimes. And in 2021, the first sex crime verdict against a Serbian police officer was handed down in Pristina. Under international law, all victims of war crimes, including survivors of sexual violence, have a right to remedy and reparation from the state. And accordingly, in February 2018, you see how many years it took, the Kosovo government's commission to recognize and verify survivors of sexual violence during the Kosovo armed conflict, they started receiving applications from people who were seeking the official status of survivor of wartime sexual violence. And this status in Kosovo grants official recognition of a victim's suffering, as well as makes them eligible for welfare benefits, such as monthly payments in the amount of 230 euros, which in Kosovo's case is significant. And I will sum up with saying that the sexual atrocities committed in Bosnia and Herzegovina were a turning point in international recognition of protection for women in conflict and attempts by governments and aid workers to solve the problems of women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this helicopter view and for the data and for all your knowledge and experience. And I want now to move to the question of the similarities and differences of the war in Balkans and the war in Ukraine, Ukrainian women and all the society faces now. We see there are actually evident differences because the Balkan women didn't have social media, they didn't have possibility to speak, the media attention was not so high. Now we see that Ukraine is like everywhere online on the agenda, and we as a journalists and activists work on that. But still we see the same problems, the same sexual crimes used as the genocide against the people, and we also see that women suffer. And can you please sum up what are the differences and similarities and what lessons were learned and what maybe were not learned enough? And what's your conclusion? How do you see this war and how do you see the impact of war on Ukrainian women?
Thank you so
Maja,
much.
Please start.
I will gladly. This is a hard question, you know, and I am not expert on wars. I am expert on how do we really make sure that the needs of women and the gender equality is included in our financial response. And everything is financial response. What the government is doing now, what the humanitarians are doing, what international community is doing. So I think the first difference that I see, we now have tools. We have very fine, polished tools that will make sure, that should make sure that we do not forget. We do not forget the needs of women. We now know what is sexual crime. We do know what that does on a personal level, what that does on societal level. We know what that does on economic level. We should not pretend and discuss this 20 years after, or let women associations deal with that for 20 years, as they have done in Balkans. We now have very solid legislative frameworks, but we also have very active international community that also cannot keep their eyes closed. We have a lot of education processes on how to include gender discussions in all the discussions. I made my many bullet points, but I really just wanted to highlight one main difference, and that is that we have tools available. For example, I work with gender responsive budgeting, and I have seen many of my colleagues in this marathon, from the ones that are opening, Julia Sibiranska, Ina Savsun, and many other women. I saw Mariana Kolodi is going to speak. These are all women who have been working with gender responsive budgeting, because this is the concept that ensures that all of our financial decisions, for example, now we are having a budget of Ukraine as well, and that budget can and should be analyzed for its gender implications. I want to just greet Ukraine for doing it. You know, countries usually drop gender equality when the first problem comes, especially in the situations of the conflict and war. And the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance didn't do that. So this is one of the tools that can help ensure that we don't forget about the needs of those who need the funds the most, often women and men in different socioeconomic conditions. So that's one thing. I will touch upon gender budgeting again, but then I also need to say that one big lesson learned from the Balkan wars is that the importance of women getting together, the importance of what we are doing today, but the importance of women getting together and then spread the voice out. We cannot, I think, allow to have peace or any kind of political negotiations without the women voice being there, without seeing women around the table, strong women. And I'm really happy. I know that in Ukraine, this is already different. I gave you the example that in Balkan, we didn't have even one woman who was discussing Dayton Peace Accord. And maybe just one more highlight there, because I put here many lessons. So one is this importance of women groups. It's so important to keep putting the important things on the agenda. That's the first thing. To establish supported legal platforms, because we had legal centers that have been assisting women disadvantaged by gender blind laws. So it's important to have the legal support for women and to recognize the needs. Addressing sexual violence, we already talked a lot about that, and now we have the instruments to do it better. But I also think my last point is, we often have these discussions about gender implications separate for any other important discussions. And I'm, of course, putting quotation marks. I hope everybody can see that. There's a big quotation marks.
We do.
Because gender equality issues, they concern us all. In the panel on education, the colleagues were talking about the disability status. They are talking about the age groups. We are talking about women and men in all their diversity. We are talking about LGBTI+, all of these groups that we need to be aware and mindful when we are making big political, economic, and societal decisions after all. So this is maybe my last point, because in looking at the wars on Balkan, the first thing that is evident is the absence of women agents, absence of the voice. So I'm using this voice, I hope, quite passionately. And I'm so happy that we are having women here around the table, and we do want to be at the decision-making tables now in the war and in the peace negotiations and in rebuilding Ukraine.
Thank you very much. It's impressive. Thanks. Vineta, can you join, please?
Yeah, thank you. I have some issues with sound, but I'm back. The notable difference between the Balkans and Ukraine is the basis, is the very base of the conflict. Ethnicity versus territorial aggression, conquest, or intra versus inter-conflict. And finding common ground may be harder as there is less share. And the notable similarity of the Western Balkans and Ukraine is that one of the root drivers of aggression is identity politics. Others don't or shouldn't really exist, therefore violence is justified. And in both cases, the role of women was and will be crucial. And it will be crucial to leverage change. In the Western Balkans, women's reconciliation efforts helped finding space for continuous dialogue and bridging what divided communities, sometimes through recognition of all being in pain. Ukraine may decide to do something similar. And when I look at other similarities, of course, it's gender-based violence, what we just discussed. It's a devastating psychological effect on those persons who have lost relatives, homes, education, and career opportunities. And it's also post-traumatic stress syndrome, and how to heal people, how to heal their mental state. Like during the Balkan Wars in the 90s, women in Ukraine who are caring for children and the elderly, especially in areas of active combat, they face shortage of essential medicine, and they also face a shortage of healthcare. And later on, I will mention a couple of great examples how this issue is being tackled. And then one more thing, which was already addressed by Kseniya, is cyber threats in Ukraine's case. And that is the difference when we speak about, when we compare the Western Balkans and Ukraine. In Ukraine's case, in addition to other forms of threat, Ukrainian women are also exposed to various forms of cyber violence. Sexual cyber violence, online threats, and blackmail in exchange for money, phishing emails with monetary, humanitarian, psychological assistance. Women have experienced loss of their social media accounts, fake job offers from well-known international companies, or invitations to participate in charity events for their relatives by unknown organizers after paying a monetary contribution. And this is addition threat or burden which amounts on Ukrainian women. But I know that Ukrainian society is incredibly resilient, and a couple of weeks ago here in NATO HQ in Brussels, we held a conference devoted to women in tech, and we also had a panel on Ukraine, where two Ukrainian panelists spoke about cyber threats and how they are being addressed and tackled. And it's really amazing. So, and Ukraine is, we all can learn from Ukraine's experience and how all these problems are being addressed and all the success stories.
Thank you very much. The next, my question will be focused on integrating gender aspects in recovery and reconstruction plans, including financial aspects. And you might have already mentioned about that. How important is it? My question is, how does it work? Who benefit from that? Because we really very often hear that it's not on time. We will do that later. And gender equality seems to be something vague, something on paper. Oh my God, what's going on? But I know that all the society, all the members of the society benefit from that. And there are very, very, very like precise examples of how it works. So I want you to name what is the benefit for all the people in about including these gender aspects. And I also want to ask you if some opportunities were missed in Balkans and we now can make this lesson learned and change something in Ukraine. So please go.
Oh, Kseniya, we could talk about this so long. Whenever you ask the question, I'm seeing new perspective. First to say, this is a topic that I'm working on for 20 years, on how and what and why should we use gender lens when we are planning the budget. And I just want to be very blunt here. The sentence that I heard the most in my career was, we didn't know. We didn't know. We do gender analysis ex post, after we implemented the program, any support program, any infrastructure program. And then we see huge gender gaps, and we somehow didn't reach one whole group. Very often we didn't reach women, but we also see that we didn't reach men in health policies, for example, in Ukraine, this was the case. So what gender lens is putting to the budget, and now I'm speaking not as a human rights professional, but as budget professional, it's bringing better budgetary decision making. So only with really solid gender analysis, and gender analysis, in other words, is understanding the actual needs of women and men and all the groups in a society. We cannot budget without really understanding that at this moment of time, as unfortunately, as throughout the history, we do have people with very different needs and marginalized groups and different needs of women and men. So having gender lens on the budget planning is actually making us, supporting us to make better budgetary decisions. I also want to say to colleagues, and I hope there are a lot of colleagues with us, I mean, in the 6 years that we have been, Ukraine is working with gender budgeting concept for many years. And only in the time when I was fortunate to be there, 300 budget programs have been analyzed, and many more before and after. And all of these budget programs showed gender gaps in all the sectors you can imagine. And most of these programs were then improved to be more gender responsive. And if I give you the example now, maybe just very briefly to say, I said it briefly at the beginning, what we really want to make sure that is, even now when Ukraine is again having its budget, the budget is again done in a very similar way as always. So it is important that now the budget is analyzed from gender perspective. At the same time, we are having the humanitarian response that is very serious. And this is also something that needs to be acknowledged, but it should be demanded that these actions and projects are analyzed from gender perspective, because if they are not, there is a higher chance that they will not really reach all the beneficiaries. And this is something that is profoundly important now in the situation of war. And having said that, this requires also a lot of education on the side of international community as well, and engagement. So basically, maybe 2 more sentences to say that with gender responsive budgeting, we want to integrate clear gender perspective within the overall context of the budgetary process. And the key is really this gender analysis. Who do we want to target? How do we ensure that the whole target group is there? What are the key gender gaps? How do we address gender-based violence, sexual reproductive health issues? All of these need to be part of the discussion of the humanitarian response. And only then we can say that we can have the equitable development, including in the war and post-war. Maybe just to say that at this point there are, or maybe I leave it for the end, but maybe I give it the floor. I'm looking at yes, just to say that there are a lot of colleagues in Kiev, in Ukraine, sorry that I'm mentioning Kiev, of course I mean about all the oblasts and cities in Ukraine. There are a lot of colleagues that are working with this concept of gender lens on the financial decision making. So I think their knowledge should be used now and should be kind of demanded to be included in the international response and in the national response at the state and local level. Again, I know this is already been going on. And just to say, Kseniya, you asked me, why is this better? And I hope I managed to explain, because if we do budgeting without gender lens, we are not seeing one part of the picture at all. And then we end up with all the issues that we were mentioning now that were conflict and war specific, but are in fact very important in the peace and reconstruction as well. Vineta, sorry, I don't want to take the floor from you. We have 15 more minutes.
We are on time, don't worry. So we are good with following time. I will continue by saying that both men and women suffer as a consequence of wars. However, conflicts and humanitarian disasters around the world tend to disproportionately affect women and children. And additionally, women's voices are regularly excluded or ignored during peacemaking, which you might already mentioned. And to give you an example, in major peace processes between 1992 and 2017, women made up just 3% of mediators, 3% of witnesses and signatories, and 9% of negotiators. So you see this disproportion. And in case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as Maja already mentioned, no woman was among the negotiators, mediators, or signatories of the internationally brokered Dayton Agreement in 1995, which is the general framework agreement for peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the participation of women in a formal peace process is vital for a society to move forward during post-conflict periods, and that must be recognized. Why? Because women have unique perspectives on what is needed. And since they represent a cornerstone of families and communities, they offer different perspectives on the political, economic, and social life, as well as on the future of a nation. And women participation in de-escalation, conflict prevention, and reconstruction allow for a fuller picture, for a better picture on what is going on, what is not addressed, and opportunities. And research demonstrates that when women are involved in peace building, peace is often longer lasting. And that is why it is vital that women are part of Ukraine's reconstruction, political, economic, and social reconstruction. And in the face of full-scale war, Ukrainian society is changing more rapidly than ever. And with more men fighting, a growing number of women now serve as the heads of households. And women are also assuming leading roles in supporting the troops and humanitarian efforts. And over the past 9 years, the number of women serving in the Ukrainian military has more than doubled, with another wave of women joining after Russia's full-scale invasion. And that is why it is so important that Ukrainian women who are fighting on the front line and form a cornerstone of Ukraine's resistance today, that they are at the center of the rebuilding and reconstruction effort, and they simply must equally contribute to decisions taken at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 10 minutes left, and I want, together with you, to think on how to help Ukrainian women. I want to talk both I want to talk about 4 pillars of the 1325 UN resolution and discuss both the protection and prevention, because this is the basis. We can't ensure anything developing without giving women basic security. But at the same time, I want you to speak about participation, relief and recovery, about empowerment of women, because as we see, when women are excluded at the beginning, it always affects the consequences. So please tell us, think with me about how to protect women more and how to empower more, how to make Ukrainian leaders, Ukrainian women rights organizations more powerful, and how to encourage the young leaders, our daughters, to be very feeling response for what's happening and forming this very strong network of women who will change future, I hope.
Kseniya, again, the million-dollar question. I don't want to talk about the currency, but I talk about money a lot because I think there is
money
a
is
lot
good.
of power.
It all starts with money, you know,
It
like
all
the violence.
Exactly, you know, it starts and ends. It's a trick thing, you know, because we often have a beautiful legislative frameworks and beautiful political discussions and beautiful commitments, and then we analyze the funds and where they went, and they didn't go towards satisfying these priorities. So this has been a really passion of mine for a number of years. I mean, you asked about the 4 pillars of the Resolution 1325, and you asked about how to empower women. I think women are empowered, and women in Ukraine are empowered, and the power is definitely on your side. And I think you have a voice, and the voice of Ukrainian women is strong and should be loud. This is my first message, and I think this is what we were discussing, both Vineta and I. This is one of the key lessons that we have learned in the war in Bosnia. This voice needs to be loud and persistent, and it needs to be there the whole time. So it's important to demand participation. I know, I'm aware I'm using strong words, but it's a strong situation, and it's important. And I think it's really important not to be in the situation that 30 years after there will be this girl from Kiev or Chernivtsi or wherever, Kherson, Kharkiv, doesn't matter, who will speak at some forum and say, we didn't have the voice. There were no women who were recognized in the conflict. There was no status of women who suffered sexual violence in the war. So I think this is the first thing, to have the voice, but to build this voice through education. And this is the panel that was right before us that was tackling exactly on the issues of how to put the gender perspective in the education and give the voice to these young girls as well, and boys, of course. So it's to demand, to participate, to voice, and to engage. I think one of the key lessons is, of course, to build these communities, primarily of women, but of course then of women and men that are working towards introducing this participatory decision making. Of course, the other thing, the things that I am usually focusing on, and we started with that, is the financial side, because in the wars, in the situation of extreme crisis, again, funds are especially scarce. And I think one thing that is happening in Ukraine now, there is a lot of funds coming in. And this is really good, and this is really important. But it is important that they are used to the right cause. And they cannot be used for the right cause if there has been no gender analysis in that decision making. So my key message, and that really lies in my professional expertise, is on Ukrainian side and on the side of these empowered women and men, to demand gender analysis and to demand gender responsive assistance, because this is also very important, and also gender responsive budgeting that is already happening within Ukraine. So on my side, I think these are the three things. The voice, empowerment is already there. I really do think that we are empowered enough. It's just to make sure that this empowerment is being heard, and that the voice is loud enough, and that we don't accept to be excluded. And when I say we, now I put myself in that Ukrainian women are not excluded from all the discussions, in particular from financial discussions.
Thank you very much. Vineta?
Yeah, and I will continue. Here in NATO, our support to Ukraine is done through short-term, medium-term, and longer-term perspective. And Kseniya, when you ask how to help Ukrainian women now, and maybe I will elaborate. We have a couple of minutes left. So women need support most when they are caught in the middle of conflict or war. It's displacement, it's emotional stress, gender-based violence, lack of electricity, water and heating, loss of income, unpaid care work, rising poverty levels. All these factors have a grave impact on women and girls of Ukraine. And the large-scale destruction of infrastructure has left social services and healthcare and other critical forms of support out of reach for many. And that is why the support provided to Ukrainian women by governments, by NGOs and international organizations is so important in this short-term perspective. And in this regard, UN Women's Program Safe Space for Women and Girls in the regions in Zaporizhia and Ivano-Frankivsk, they do a great job because these safe spaces offer to women a place to recover emotionally. And I think to recover offers, a place to recover for women and their kids. And it's extremely important that women have a space or a place where they can go, where they can receive legal advice, where they can receive information about local employment and housing resources, where they can also learn, how to protect themselves against cybersecurity. Because as we already spoke, kids need to be taught, how to protect. And this is another thing. And another thing, Russia regretfully is seeding Ukraine with landmines. And that is why mine risk education, especially for children, is so important. So this is just why I will add to what was already said, because the war separates our lives until war and after war. And the challenge is to connect these parts and to continue life.
Thank you very much both for your work, for these inspiration words, and for this possibility to analyze the experience and to think about what really can be done and how we can make the process faster, better, and with a great connection. And I really think that the great opportunity for Ukraine is this unity of women, of men. You also are here today. I thank you very much. And I think that together I hope we will win soon. And we will think about women, about kids, and about human rights during all our way to this victory. Thank you very much, both. And thanks for contribution for the marathon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I wish you good luck and good energy. You are really strong in holding this marathon. It's really as much physical as it is.
We try our best. So thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Many thanks, Kseniya. I was honored. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.